One I'll learn. And I'll
This
get
is
into
kind of like a improv we're doing here now.
Well, guess what, folks? We are going live at this moment here on the Daily Blue. Welcome to the Steve Levy Show, the first of many installments to come looking into the future. We are very, very excited about this show. We welcome everyone out there on the internet, and hopefully you'll find this show to be very insightful, possibly controversial from time to time, but also important going forward. We're going to want to have you calling in and telling us your thoughts on issues of the day. Speaking of issues of the day, when I had to come up with the first topic that we would talk about on the Steve Levy Show, I thought it appropriate to talk about that issue that I was most identified with in my 26 years in public life, and that was keeping control over taxes. I'll tell you how this started out for me. I started knocking on doors as a 25-year-old trying to get into public office back in 1985. And it seemed that every house that I knocked on, whether it was a Democratic house, Republican, conservative, independent, it didn't matter, they all had the same complaint. What's your big issue? Taxes, taxes, taxes. And this was back in 85 and 86. And we saw it get even more pronounced over the years as the tax burden continued to climb higher and higher and higher. So what this show is about is not just to talk about what we did to try to get control over the tax rate, and you'll see it was only a small amount that we could control on a county level. But more importantly, this show is going to be about what you can do as a resident to lower your taxes in the quickest way possible. And it's not by going down to Hauppauge or going to Albany or going to Washington and complaining about your taxes. It's filing a tax grievance. And we have with us today two stars in that area. Debbie Moss, to my immediate right, from the Mark Lewis Tax Grievance Company. Welcome, Debbie.
Thank you.
And Dan McCormick, who joined up with the law firm I joined up with after leaving public office. That's the law firm of Campolo, Middleton, and McCormick. You are not that McCormick, Pat McCormick. You are Dan McCormick, who was once the interim assessor in Brookhaven Town. So you're the cream of the crop in that area on the commercial side. So welcome here as well.
Thank you, Steve.
Good
afternoon. It's my pleasure to be here.
Thanks. Well, I wanted to tell the folks out there how great this system is, because it can help tens of thousands of people out there on the island. There have already been tens of thousands who have been helped up to this point. But going back to the efforts that I made in my stint as first a legislator and then as a county, a state assemblyman, and then as a county executive, I did my best to try to keep control over taxes. So what did we do? I came in as county executive in 2004. We cut the cars that were being doled out as lollipops. We put our health system out to bid and saved $17 million. We attrited down the size of the government by about 10%. We took the sheriffs and we put them in place of the police on the highways and saved $12 million a year. We did a lot to bring down spending. And in fact, before my tenure, there had never been a year where the spending went up less in one year than the previous year. But I did it 3 times just by cutting and making tough decisions. But you know, even after all that, Debbie and Dan, all I can tell people is, you know, I can lower your county level of taxes, but that's only 10% of your tax bill. When I started out, the county tax bill, county portion of the tax bill was about 13%. We held the line so much that it was down to about 10% of a person's bill by the time I left office, because while we were holding the line, the other levels were going up. The towns, in many cases, some towns were good, some weren't. The fire districts, the library districts, the villages, but the schools were the biggest nut at 2/3. You know, sometimes it's 66, 70% of one's bill. So I can tell people, look, I'm doing everything I can to keep your taxes under control. In fact, for the 8 years that I was there, we never raised the general fund property tax. But that's only 10% of your bill. If you really want to make a difference, grieve your taxes. And that's what I want to get into, is showing the folks out there how easy it is to grieve. And what I found when I was working with Mark, God bless his soul, who passed just a year ago, about a year ago, Mark was the guru. Mark made tax grievance the big thing out here on Long Island. And what I learned is that about 1/3 of the population is overassessed and they're primed for a grievance. About 1/3 are probably below their proper assessment, and about 1/3 are probably right where they should be. But there's a lot of myths out there that Mark told me about. One is that you don't have to fear. If you grieve and you lose, your taxes cannot go up. By law, they cannot go up. So it's almost like a no-brainer. You call up the Mark Lewis Center, and they tell you right away, yeah, either you're overassessed, underassessed, or just right. And they're not going to waste their time if they think you are underassessed, because they won't make any money that way, and neither will you. The other good thing is they don't get paid unless you win. So it's a contingency-based system, so you're not shelling out hundreds of dollars only to be told, no, it's not working. They take your case only if they think it works, and then if you win, you take a percentage.
Right.
If you lose, nothing paid by the homeowner. Sounds like a deal too good to be true. But Debbie, the Mark Lewis Tax Grievance Company has done this for tens of thousands of people, correct?
Yes, we have. We've been in business since 1992 and under the Mark Lewis Tax Grievance Service. I've worked for Mark since that time. I started in real estate. I knew the market. I used to do it for my homeowners that I had listings for, and I would help them reduce their property taxes. And it's a very easy situation. You just have to come in, call us, go online now with the internet. All you have to do is fill out an application and send it in, and we look it over and tell you, yes, you're entitled, no, sorry. You know, and if you feel that we made a mistake, you just call us and tell us, well, this house next door just sold for this and I didn't have it, that sale, then we'll try to see what we can do.
Now, you guys are still located in that red, white, and blue
Blue
office
yeah.
building on Middle Country Road in Center East.
Right.
And what's the phone number there?
It's 631-696-2222, and it's the building with the American flags on it. You can't miss it.
Now, there's a time frame at which a resident can grieve, and at some point you're not ready for it. So what is that window where people should be looking to think about whether they want to grieve?
The busiest time is usually from the 1st of January to the 3rd Tuesday in May, but we do it all year long. So if you miss out the 3rd Tuesday in May and come in June 1st, we will take your application, but it won't go into the following year. It's always the 3rd Tuesday in May that you can grieve.
Right.
Now,
That's a great point, Mark. Just to reiterate, this year that would be May 20th, 2014.
Right.
So you must file a petition with those respective townships by that date. Otherwise, you'd have to wait a whole year again before you could grieve your taxes.
Right. So now, Debbie is with the Mark Lewis Tax Grievance Company, and you folks deal exclusively with residential homes.
Residential homes, yes.
And Dan, you are in business in affiliation with the law firm of Campolo, Middleton, and McCormick, where I am an of counsel. The phone number there being 631-738-9100.
Yes.
Ask for yours truly, Steve Levy, and or Dan McCormick. And Dan, you handle the commercial real estate assessments, and they are different. Can you explain how they differ as far as one can go to small claims and one can't, et cetera?
Right. Like Mark Lewis's tax service, we also pride ourselves on an extremely user-friendly format. We utilize a one-page questionnaire that we can forward via email or regular mail to property owners, because we recognize we all live hectic and busy lives. So we make it as easy as possible for folks. They complete a one-page questionnaire. They send it back via email or regular mail. We then evaluate the property's characteristics based on that data, as well as tax rates, to determine one issue. Is the property overassessed or properly assessed? If it's overassessed, we then can file a grievance by that same May 20th date for this year, 2014, and then that starts the ball rolling, so to speak, in terms of going forward with your grievance.
And again, if people are interested in doing the grievance on the commercial side, they should just call Campolo, Middleton, and McCormick at 738-9100. That's 631. They are right on Johnson Avenue and Vets Highway. The official address is Veterans Highway in Ronkonkoma. Now, Deb, your process can go straight to court. Now, from what I understand, most people make the mistake of grieving before the town, and 9 times out of 10, the town
Turns them
is going to
down.
turn them down. Why? Because the town doesn't want to have you win, because that comes out of the town's pocket. Actually, if you're not grieving and everyone else is, when the people who grieve and win get their taxes lower, the other people see the increase to make up that difference. So the town doesn't want this, so they go out of their way to knock it down. But the easy way to get around that is what?
Taking it into small claims court or call us. If you do it on your own, that's what happens. The majority of the time, town turns you down and you just walk away. But if you go through us, what we do is now we have 30 days after the town notifies us to submit it into small claims court. So we submit them into small claims court for the fee that there is, and then we wait to get a court date. And we
So
go to
for
court.
people who are intimidated or about the court system or don't have the time to do it, it's just easier to call the Mark
Yes.
Lewis Tax Grievance Company. You don't pay them
Nothing.
unless they take your case, and they're only going to take your case if they feel they can win, and then you only get paid if you win,
If we
and they
win.
save money,
Yes.
correct? Okay.
Yes.
So now, Dan, on the commercial side, it's different. You really need a lawyer to do this on the commercial side. You just can't go to the town or small claims on your own and try to get that done. Explain how that's done.
That's a great question, Steve. Like the residential side, the first step is identical. You must file your petition by the 3rd Tuesday in May with the town. Generally speaking, the boards of assessment review in those respective towns will deny you. It's this next step that changes for the commercial property owners. We then file a regular Supreme Court petition, a regular Supreme Court case on the tax certiorari aspect of your case, which relates to commercial and industrial properties in general. It then goes through the regular Supreme Court system, which is different and apart from the residential filings called, as Debbie has referred to, the small claims cases. That's really the major difference between the cases at that particular point. We also then utilize different approaches to valuation on the commercial side. In addition to the sales comparison, which is often used on the residential, we also utilize a valuation approach known as capitalization of income, whereby we simply look at the property to see how much it garners in terms of rental income, and then we capitalize that number to come up with a valuation through the eyes of an investor who is going to invest in this property. We then compare that number to the present assessed value as the town is claiming it's worth, and then we go forward from that point.
And that's really what's happening even on the residential side, right, Debbie? Basically, whether it's the town or the court, they're going to be comparing that individual, your client, to their neighbors of a like-size house. So they're not going to compare your 4-bedroom, 2.5 bath to the neighbor who's 3-bedroom, 1 bath. They're going to look at other 4-bedroom, 2.5 bath, approximately the same square footage, preferably on that same block or similar
within
circumstances.
the area.
Now, there is this tremendous discrepancy in assessments, I guess in part because in a perfect world, the assessors would be reassessing every 2 years or so to keep it up to date. Basically, they're supposed to be putting a fair market value attached to each house out there. But the values of the market are fluctuating year to year. They're not keeping up with it in the town. The town assessors, they don't have the manpower, they don't have the money to do that. So how do they try to compensate for that, Dan? They use something called an RAR. What is that exactly?
Okay. An RAR simply means a number that is a ratio in comparison to the total value of the property. So they utilize those numbers to try and equalize value. And when they utilize those numbers, they come up with what the assessment is.
Should be.
That's correct.
But
And
it
that's-
doesn't always come out exact as it should
That's
be.
correct, and you raise a great point, Mark. The reason being, of course, as we all know, the real estate market is generally in a state of flux. It changes from year to year based on economics and, most importantly, supply and demand. So maybe a house or a business, for example, might be worth $150,000 in 2013, but because of market dynamics in 2014, that value changes. Even though the town has a number set by the RAR and the assessed valuation. And
So
that's
that's
where
why,
we come in.
that's why there is this big potential for winning. You wouldn't think that there'd be such discrepancy from house to house or town or hamlet to hamlet, but there is, because they don't do the follow-up every year or every 2 years. Now, Debbie, again, you're from the Mark Lewis Tax Grievance Company, phone number being?
631-696-2222 or marklewistax.com.
Okay. I mean, you've seen some big differentials there. What are some of the numbers that you've seen homeowners come back with winning in this process? Yeah.
I think our highest amount was $9,470 we have saved people. And then sometimes we're not as lucky, we might save them $500,
But here's the point, though.
it's still $500 in your pocket.
Every year.
Every year,
Right?
yes.
That's an important point, because people think, well, are you guys taking a percentage every year? That doesn't happen.
No.
You take their case, you win, you take a percentage of what they get back for the first year, but then their base has been lowered forever. And every year thereafter, they're continuing to save $1,000 a year, $1,500, whatever it was.
Yes.
That's big
Yeah,
stuff.
yeah.
What are some of are there areas that you've seen a bigger discrepancy in others? Like the story has been on Long Island, that especially minority areas, they really get whacked. There was a 4-bedroom, 2.5 high ranch in Brentwood, let's say, and maybe 30, 40 years ago, 50 years ago, that house might have had the same value as a high ranch in Sayville, okay? And since then, the fair market values in Sayville are twice, 3 times that in Brentwood, yet some folks in Brentwood are paying like $9,000 for that, and it might be equal or just a little tad above or below what they're paying in Sayville or Bayport. Really crazy stuff, and that's what is really the basis for the grievance, correct?
Yes, definitely. That's the way we do it.
Are there some towns that have a wider discrepancy? Are there some towns that are harder to deal with than other towns, or are more aggressive in how they battle you in court?
I would say, well, since I've been doing this, I would say that there is one town that gives us a little bit of a hard time, but
You still wound up.
still do it. Some towns aren't even entitled. I could say that they are assessed correctly, a lot of it, certain areas, and it happens to be, the areas like you're talking about, Sayville and that. We don't do too many in Sayville because the area is assessed correctly.
Pretty much up there.
Yeah.
But
you go.
regardless of where people are, they should just call in
Oh, yeah.
at the number, which is
696-2222-631, and we check it right away.
you can check right away.
Right there.
I was amazed. I used to have Mark Lewis come to these forums that we had. Mark, God rest his soul, he passed away last year. But Mark would be there with a calculator, and we'd have like 100 people in the audience, and he'd just say, all right, bring your tax bill, and he'd just look at the tax bill and multiply that by the RAR, which we talked about before, and he'd let them know right then and there whether they're overassessed or underassessed. It was amazing. But that's how easy it is.
Yes,
That's
it's very easy.
Dan, again, you're a former interim assessor over at Brookhaven Town. Now you're in the private sector helping people on the other side of the conference table through our firm, Campolo, Middleton, and McCormick. You've seen some big wins in your days. What are some of the numbers that you've gotten back for some of these businesses?
We are generally looking at a spectrum between roughly 20 to 60% on the commercial side for reductions, based on the type of property and where it's located, and based, of course, on capitalization of income valuation approaches.
So give me a number, an absolute number. Some of the clients that you've had, what kind of savings have they gotten?
In terms of real dollar numbers, you're looking anywhere from $25,000 to up to $60,000 in a reduction in their property taxes.
That's incredible, and that's every year going.
That's correct.
Going forward.
That is correct. Right.
This is really, it used to be the unknown, the hidden secret that the towns didn't want people to know about, and there was a lot of people in the know. Oh yeah, my brother-in-law just did it, so I'll do it. But now people are catching on. But there's still a big base of folks out there who have not yet called up an agency such as Mark Lewis Tax Grievance Company over on Middle Country Road in Center Reach to just call and find out in 2 seconds, hey, am I overassessed or not? Again, let's talk about those myths that people are fearful of. Can you dispel them, Debbie?
Well, they're afraid that if they get a reduction, their taxes are going to go up, which is definitely untrue. If they're afraid that somebody from the town is going to come and inspect their property, which is pretty much untrue.
So if they put in an application and the court or the town says, no, we think you're underassessed, can the court or the town say, we're going to raise your taxes?
No.
And they cannot do that.
not
They're
allowed to do
forbidden
it.
from
They
doing
are
that.
forbidden from doing that. If
By
they-
operation of law.
By operation of law, they have to do the whole, am I right? They have to do the whole town at the same time.
That is correct. It would
Yes.
have
So
to
if
be
you
a
looked in a
complete
dictionary
reevaluation.
under the term no-brainer, this
That
would
would
be
be
right
no-brainer.
there.
That's right.
It is,
Yeah.
I don't know why anybody wouldn't call you guys up and try to find out, am I overassessed? And again, that's the Mark Lewis Tax Grievance Company over in Center Reach on Middle Country Road. And it's the law firm of Campolo, Middleton, McCormick, Dan McCormick here at 738-9100. You could just ask for yours truly, Steve Levy, if you call in. I'm a member of that firm as well. And, you know, or there's plenty of other companies out there as well. Doesn't have to be the Mark Lewis Company. It doesn't have to be Campolo, Middleton, and McCormick. Call somebody. Do it yourself. Don't let this opportunity go by where you might be overpaying in your taxes $1,000 a year, and think of all those years that you haven't grieved, that money could have been going into your kids' college education fund. Remember that. It's never too late to start. Now, I would think that the best times to grieve are on the downside of the market. Is that true, or is it better in a high part of the market or any time? It doesn't really matter. Deb?
I agree, anytime, right?
I would
Anytime.
also say the same thing on the
Anytime.
commercial side. It is always a good idea to have a tax professional review your assessment at any given time because of the various factors. Market valuation,
Right.
tax rates most importantly, and the tax levy. So those three considerations warrant a review at any
Yeah.
given time.
Is there any advice that you would give to our viewers out there? Are there common mistakes that are made by viewers out there who are looking to grieve their taxes?
A lot of them just don't know what the sales in the area are to compare their houses to. They think, and you have to use valid sales.
Well, within the last 6 months or a
6
year?
months, a year, yes.
Okay, but you
Yeah.
have all of that
We
information,
have all that
as though
information. Yep.
you're a realtor.
Yes, we have
You have
everything.
access to all of the recent
All
closing.
this- Yep, everything.
Right. And also, Mark, a lot of
Steve,
folks...
I'm a
sorry.
big fan of Mark
I'm
Lewis, and we're talking about Mark. There's a guy in my law firm, I'll have you know, all right?
Sorry, Steve.
I'll get back to you on that, Pete. Dan, go ahead.
The other misconception is that by sharing this information, the government is going to use it for other purposes.
Oh,
And that is simply not true. They're only going to evaluate the data in relation to the grievance process. They don't take this data and then use it elsewhere in general. Okay, so that's
Right.
another fear, especially on the commercial side. For example, income and expense information. We utilize that data to come up with a capitalization of income approach. And basically, we share that with the assessor to look at the numbers and determine if a reduction is warranted. And so that's a large misconception that I deal with. That it's the first thing I always say. They're only going to look at it for tax grievance purposes.
Great.
And
Now-
that's
now-
generally what happens.
The Daily Blue goes out to a big market out there, to tens of thousands of people throughout Long Island and beyond. We should explain the difference between the tax policies and practices, the assessments in Nassau County and Suffolk here. Now, in Nassau, the assessment is done countywide, where in Suffolk, it's done by each of the individual 10 towns. So if you're going to grieve your taxes and you live in Islip, you go to the Islip assessor. You are an assessor in Brookhaven town. There's 3 towns in Nassau County, Hempstead, North Hempstead, Oyster Bay, but they don't do the assessments, as does a master county assessor. So that's important for people to know. Nassau County is having big problems with their assessment system, and there's hundreds of millions of dollars that are owed because of all these grievances that have been filed on the business side.
That's right.
But I thought it was important to note to people that here in Suffolk, you go to the town, in Nassau County, you do it to the county. Do you foresee, Dan, any changes in that Nassau system? They've been talking about it for a long time.
They have been talking about it a long time, and quite frankly, I don't see anything on the horizon right now, but we'll see where that goes. An important point, though, Nassau County did go through a reevaluation.
Just a couple of years ago.
Correct. And yet, there are still tax grievance cases coming into the system, and property owners are garnering reductions. So that just goes to show you that even in a complete reevaluation by real estate professionals, because of the changing markets, properties can still be overassessed in that market.
And I know towns like Southampton, for instance, they were subject to a lawsuit. And the judge came in and actually forced the town assessors to bring it up to date because it had gone so out of whack. But even with that a few years ago, unless they're reassessing every year or two, which is really hard to do in these strained financial times, it's not going to happen. So the point is, folks, the opportunity is there for you to get free money, basically, by putting in your claim for an assessment. Remember, you can't go up. The worst that can happen is folks like the Mark Lewis Company or Dan McCormick at Campolo, Middleton, and McCormick will tell you you're assessed just fine, or you're actually underassessed. It's a no-brainer. Take advantage of it. We hope you learned something in this first installment of the Steve Levy Show. We'll see you next time.
Thank you.